there's the question of people going back to these jobs, and we don't know of that 22,000 jobs that we have lost, how many of those are actually available. We don't know.
Sure.
And but the idea that the governor is promoting is to simply take away the federal boost on unemployment benefits so people are all going to go back to work is a pretty, I'll be charitable here and say it's a very precarious notion.
By the way, I just went to Common Good Iowa website and tried to subscribe to the newsletter. I couldn't do it for whatever reason. Now, we don't have the best internet service in town. We don't have the best internet service in town or in the state. We have Mediacom.
Okay.
So it could be an internet problem on our end. But yeah, I did try to.
I'll check that. I appreciate you mentioning that.
Yeah.
I'll check that out. If somebody is interested in getting our newsletter and can't get it that way, just have them send me an email to mowen@commongoodiowa.org.
Yeah. Give that email address again, please.
Mowen, MOWEN, @commongoodiowa.org.
All right. Yeah. Okay.
And I'll make sure we'll get them on the list. Because I know it's one of the things we've always done, we did this at the Iowa Policy Project too, is we don't bombard you with, an email a day or something like that. We don't flood your email because as a consumer of email, I know that's one of the things that you get overloaded from the same organization very much. You tend to start deleting them before you even look at them.
Oh yeah, God forbid I should miss an opportunity to get my car warranty extended.
Hey, who can I call to get that done?
Don't just wait. They'll call you. Trust me.
Oh.
Then they'll email you. We just can't understand why we haven't heard from you on this important issue of your extended.
Right.
Shut up.
I know.
Anyway, Mike Owen is our guest, and he's with Common Good Iowa, formerly the Iowa Policy Project, of course. And this is the same organization that David Osterberg is part of, and Colin Gordon and many others. But they do have a website. And by the way, I just tried it again to subscribe to the newsletter, and it worked.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
So that was good, yeah. So tell me a little bit about. I want to stay on task, but if anybody keeps an eye on education funding, it's you. So how did education fare in this last legislative session?
Exceedingly poorly. On a couple of levels, I will say one good thing that happened is that there was a boost for community colleges. But the Regents institutions were frozen at their previous level. And K-12 funding, again, is being held way too low. I mean, we had about a decade ago, or that previous decade, schools could count on increases on average of about 3% growth per year in the per pupil amount that they could use for their school budgets, which was a combination of state funding and property taxes.
Right.
But the legislature sets that, which you're going to be able to do. So on average, a decade ago, that was in the range of about 3%. We are in that time since, the 10, 11 years since, including with this year, the average is below 2%. The figure was set this year at 2.4%, which sounds better than it really is. It didn't cost the state as much for various reasons, but which is probably why it was 2.4 and not less than 2 or 2.
Sure, yeah.
This year, but it was COVID-related stuff. Enrollments were down, so the cost of the state was less. So they were able to give a little bit higher increase. That's my take on what happened. But it was set at 2.4%. So the average per year over that time is still below 2%. The cost of keeping schools operating the way we expect, if we really want our public schools to pursue achievement and excellence and prepare kids, we've got to do a lot better than that. And the revenues are there to do it. It's just that we've chosen to put them in other places.
You know, when I asked you that question, how did education fare in the legislature, I thought to myself, I bet Mike's going to tell me that education is overflowing with money. They're bursting at the seams. They got way more than they need. Thank you very much.
Now, you know I wasn't going to say that.
I sure did.
But you know what, Mike? I would like nothing more than to be able to say that. It's just that we've operated under this pretense. Remember the quarters? Some of these quarters, I don't know, 20 years ago or whenever it was, the feds did, they minted quarters with a state theme or point on the backs of quarters. And Iowa's, they went to them, they wanted the foundation in education. So they may have people have in their piggy banks or their dresser drawers old quarters with that about Iowa. And they showed a one-room schoolhouse. But
one room.
That's our foundation. Yeah, foundation in education. And number one, I think it's very clear that what we're doing in the state is eroding that foundation of education. And number two, maybe the one-room schoolhouse is an accurate portrayal.
I've talked with men.
Where we're going.
I've talked with men in the past who were on the school board here in Fort Dodge in the 60s and 70s. And they to a person, they described those years as the green years of education. There was a baby boomer generation, of course, coming up. And they actually said this, all the money they needed. If they needed money, they just went to the population or to the population of the people of the city and said, we need this. We need a new building. We need language arts or some other program or whatever. Bang, they got the money just like that. That has changed over the years. Mike Gronstal changed it when he doubled the salaries of most teachers a number of years ago and increased their benefits. And some people didn't think that was the right way for him to go.
Well, I guess I can't confirm the numbers you're using, but I think there's a few things that happened there. It used to be that our schools were primarily funded from property taxes.
Yes.
And we went to, under Governor Ray, we went to a school funding formula back in the early 70s that was designed to provide some equity across the state. So it didn't matter which school, if you were in a poor area, for example, there weren't a lot of resources that could be generated from property taxes. In the old days, you were worse off than somebody in a wealthier school district. So the idea behind the formula was to set a per pupil cost, they call it. It's a per pupil spending level for your regular budget that everybody would have. So it didn't matter if you were in Fort Dodge or Davenport or Albia or Dubuque or wherever you were, you had generally the same amount of money to spend per student. And then the way that this money was generated was in property, for simplicity's sake here, but in a property poor district where less could be raised from property tax, they received a greater share of that amount from state funding. And in property wealthy districts, they got a lesser share of their costs covered by state aid, and they had to generate it locally.
Now you're talking a progressive tax system, that we adopted in the early part of the 20th century. For some reason, we got away from the idea of a progressive tax system. I think the Republicans, especially, they have concentrated on property taxes because that's their constituency. There are a lot of the big farm groups, I think they only pay $100 per acre right now in taxes, which I know if you've got 2,000 acres adds up pretty fast. But I've asked some of our people here locally if they've just really moved, if this is not a tax cut, they've just shifted the taxes from big property owners to residential properties, especially with the loss of the backfill, which is going to hurt towns like Fort Dodge. It's going to hurt all towns, as a matter of fact, unless they're someplace like Des Moines, which can't seem to eat up enough tax money. But that's
local governments, really, schools, counties, and cities are all capped in some way on what they can spend by state policy.
Mm-hmm.
Schools is done differently than it is for cities and counties. For cities and counties, they'll have a cap on what they can levy. So you get past that amount. If you're past that, you can't go past a maximum amount. And if that maximum amount is not generating more for you, you're going to be in a world of hurt. So
well, what
growth in your community?
I'm glad you brought that up. It gives me a chance to rant here a little bit. I mean, local control means nothing in the state of Iowa anymore. I mean, we can't determine where hog barns are placed. Oh no, that's got to be regulated by the state. Oh no, we can't have. If you want more police officers, you'll just have to wait for some faraway rainy day or bright sunshiny day or something, because we're going to cap you on the amount of taxes. That should be left up to individual towns. Individual voters will decide how much they want to spend on public education and accommodations. What is the state even doing? Why are they taking local control from us? That's a heartbeat of democracy.
Well, I think there's two things going on, Mike, and one of them is that, really all these decisions that we've seen this year, maybe this isn't all that unusual, but I think it all comes down to money and power.
Yes.
And I suppose that is the game in politics, but the question is, who's getting the opportunity to make the decision, and who's at the table when those decisions are made? How much transparency is involved in those decisions? We're losing a lot of that. So we're not only losing control of the decision making, we're losing a public eye on what's going on.
Yes.
These budget decisions that were made in Des Moines this year were all made behind the scenes. You know that the Senate, there's something set up in the budget process. It's kind of an interesting element. It's been there for many years, back from, over, was it 30 years ago when I was actually covering the place. They had joint committees of House members and Senate members in various issue areas setting, budget recommendations. So you'd have House and Senate joint budget subcommittee on education or on human services or whatever. You still have that, but this year, the Senate members did not participate.
Interesting.
So there was the committees still technically met, but it was only the House members. And the Senate stayed out of it. They made their budget
separately,
but their budget recommendations totally behind the scenes. This is just, Mike, it's obscene.
It is.
It is so anti-democratic, small d. That process that they had, we lost so much of that in Iowa. You're seeing even some local governments that are rebelling at the idea that they have to have open meetings on things.
Well, the people need to stand up. I mean, the legislative body are addressing things we don't give a damn about. I mean, we got the guns thing going. That's great. Thank you very much. But the rest of the things that the Democratic Party seems to be concerned about are fighting the Republicans on practically everything. And the Republicans want to talk taxes, taxes, and taxes. They really don't want to talk about anything else. And that's where we lose, because the Democrats seem to want to talk about all these other things, transgender athletes, on and on and on. Who cares? I mean, I'm sorry, but
I think
no, I'm not.
Do care, but here's the point: is that it really doesn't, in the atmosphere we have right now, it doesn't really matter what the minority party is interested in talking about, because they don't get to talk about it.
Well, when they do get to talk, they talk about
on the issues that they're all concerned about in terms of budgeting and education funding, and whether how much we're going to divert from public schools. You talk about public schools, and what my initial response to that was that they did very poorly. Part of the reason is in that control issue, because the legislature is mandating new diversions of money that should be going to the local public schools that are funded by taxpayers and governed by locally elected school boards.
That's right.
And they're sending that money to private schools in various ways. They increased the school tuition organization tax credit, which funds private school scholarships. K-12.
Mike, we're going to have to go. We're just really getting into the meeting, but we got to go. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's 3:00.
If you're a gearhead or not, you'll enjoy the Under the Hood Car Show every Saturday afternoon from 2 till 4 on the voice of Fort Dodge, AM 1400, KVFD, Fort Dodge.
An optimistic outlook for the economy. I'm Rich Dennison, Fox News. President Biden today telling a group at a community college in Cleveland that the economy is recovering from the pandemic and passage of his infrastructure plan will help Americans across the country.
Now's the time to build the foundation that we've laid, to make bold and